Hello, hello, hello. Happy Wednesday. This is Becky with Silhouette Life Inspiration Box. Also happy to be guest posting for Craft Chameleon. Super excited. If you joined me on Monday, we talked about a lot of really neat things to do in Cricut Design Space. So now we are back in my native language of doing really cool things in Silhouette Studio. So, in case you're joining in and maybe you are on the fence about which way to go, I do recommend downloading both softwares, but more importantly, what I want to say is that Silhouette Studio is a more robust software. So if you're, joining me for Monday's video and then joining me again for Wednesday's video, we will be doing things obviously a little bit different, but there will also be more things that you can do in Silhouette Studio. So any of you Cricut users who are joining in, be sure to follow along and we might kind of win you over to the dark side here. But for the most part, we are going to perform similar tasks each week. So that's what I'm here today. We are going to work with importing SVGs using the group function versus make a compound path. We will talk a little bit about tracing, and then we will talk about being able to save into different formats that you might need and what you might need them for. So that's my little introduction. Let me go ahead and I'm going to get the live video. If you're tuning in on the Silhouette Life Inspiration Box page, I'm going to be able to see your comments. Just a little bit of a delay, but don't worry, Craft Chameleon folks, because I will come back and check with you guys too. So I say that to say, guest posting. Sorry, that was myself. But don't be afraid to ask questions as we're going along. If there's anything that you want to see or any requests that you have for future videos, we're going to hopefully be doing this every week. So, definitely lots of time to really dive into the software and learn some really neat stuff. Okay, so with that being said, let me also go ahead and say I'm going to keep saying SVG files, but one of the most important things, and I'm going to see if I can find the graphic for you real quick. One of the most important things with Silhouette Studio to remember with SVG files is that Silhouette Studio comparison is that you have to have the designer edition upgrade or higher. Okay, and what that means is that unlike Cricut Design Space, okay, Silhouette Studio has several different upgrades that are available for purchase. And this gives you, let me see, here we go. So this gives you the comparison. I'm sorry, that was too far down. Basic Edition, Designer Edition Plus, and Business Edition. And the reason that I'm bringing this up now, we won't go into every difference that we can find. But if you notice, the ability to import JPEG, BMP, and PNG files is standard. But if you come down, we will find, where are you? Here we go. Ability to use SVG files. Remember, this is the basic edition column right here. You'll notice you cannot use the basic edition for SVG files. Now, the only reason that is important is because when you're trying to open a file, the basic edition will tell you that the file type you're trying to use is not supported. Now, what that means is that with the basic edition, we will type it out in big letters here, you want the DXF format. Okay, DXF. Big, big, big. Remember that, write it down, make a note of it, because the DXF format means that you still get all the same goodness of an SVG file, but in a format that you can actually use without having to purchase an upgrade. Now, there are obviously lots of reasons why you would want to upgrade, but being able to use SVG files is no longer one of them. I won't say all, but the majority of designers that you are downloading or purchasing files from are including DXF format in their files now. Okay, so that's my spiel about DXF files, but I'm going to keep saying SVG because that's usually what we know these files as. All right, so SVG files, another important thing is you will want to make sure that you have unzipped them. A lot of times, myself included, when you buy files or download files, they may come in a zipped format. And that just means that you have to be able to unzip them on your computer. Now, I'm not really going to go into a lot of depth in that, but I want to show you what I do is I will download them. Let me take a screenshot. Okay. Post it in here so you guys can see. It'll take just a minute to update, but I want to show you what a zipped folder looks like versus a regular folder. Well, I guess it's not going to post, but you guys were able to see it when I had it clicked open. Basically, any folder that has the little zipper on it, okay, is in a zipped format, whereas a regular folder does not have the zipper on there. I was going to try to zoom in so that you guys could see that, but we'll just have to make do. So anytime that I need to unzip a file, let me see, do I have anything in my downloads? Where are you? Where are you? Here we go. Like, this is a file that I got. Oh man, I did that wrong. That was a file that I got from Craft Chameleon. But basically, I open up the zipped folder, and then I will drag and drop my files over into my desktop. Now, my desktop is a really big cluttered mess. You can see all these things that I have dumped on there. So I don't necessarily recommend keeping them there like I do, but you know, that's one obstacle you'll run into, is you'll have to unzip them before you can use them. Okay, so with that out of the way, when you go to use them, there are two ways that you can open them. You can go to File and Open. That will open an entirely new window. You can also go to File and Merge. Now, the difference is that File and Merge will, let me see, I'm going to open this one. See, and here's the SVG file, and see that one says DXF. And I'll show you one of the biggest differences that you'll notice, but it's definitely not make or break. But the difference with merge instead of open is when I go to merge and I open a second file, it opens on the same window. Okay, so this was my SVG file, and this was my DXF file. So you can see that DXF files are a little bit messier, okay? But again, like I said, not really make or break. One good thing, I also believe this is Designer Edition, but let me just show you. If you open a DXF file, is you have a button up here, select by color, and it will let you select by your line color, okay? So that would be all of my teal, and this would be all of my black. All right, so just something to remember. I'm going to get out of that. Okay, so SVG file, open it up, you have it, you're ready to work with it, you're going to make some magic. You go to cut it, you click the send panel, and nothing, right? Because that's the one thing that you're have to do yourself. It's already set up to cut, but you're going to have to come in here and turn on the cut lines. Okay, so what that means is when you click over to the send panel and you open up, you can select obviously tool 1, tool 2, which is less common. Tool 1 is what we're worried about now. And this is what I would normally see, and all I'm going to do is click cut. Now, what you may or may not have noticed is I did have to come over here and click on my file, then click cut. Because if I have not clicked on anything and I just try to click cut, nothing is going to happen. All right, click on your file, switch over to cut. Now I'm set up, everything's good to go, and I can proceed with this file just like if I was using a studio file or a file that I had purchased from the online store. Okay, come back over here. Now let's talk about if we were using this file as a PNG format. Okay, PNG formats can be especially tricky. Where is my PNG? This must be my PNG format. Okay, because it will come over and it will look almost exactly like my SVG format, right? Has a transparent background, all my colors are there, everything looks good. But you'll notice if I click over to my send panel, even if I click on it and hit cut, it does not cut my actual design because it's picking up that this PNG format is an image, not a cut file. Okay, so all it's going to do is cut a square. And that's very common. These are two common issues that you're going to run into when you're first starting off. I know a lot of you guys just got cameos, either for Christmas and you've been too afraid to use it, or, maybe you just now have time because you've switched to a work at home schedule, or, perhaps you've been temporarily laid off from your job. Lots of different things. We're seeing a lot of people come out, make a time for their cameos. So don't be afraid to venture out and try these new types of files, but just know that these will be things that you have to kind of file away in your brain, or maybe you're making notes with them now. Okay, so say PNG format is the only format that is available to me. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to use the trace panel. Okay, when I open the trace panel, I'm then going to click on this select trace area and I can select my entire image. Okay, so now tracing can be a little trickier, especially those of you who are used to working on Cricut. Cricut kind of takes care of it for you. Silhouette Studio does not, because it's giving you the versatility to be able to decide what you want to trace and what you don't. Now, in this particular image, with all tracing, it goes off of contrast. So you'll notice it's picked up the black. If I want it to trace the black and the blue, I'm going to need to increase my threshold. Okay, so now it picks up the black and the blue and everything's good. If you have Designer Edition or higher, you can use the trace by color. And that's where I use this little eyedropper, and I'm just going to click on the color that I want it to trace. Now, one more thing to think about with trace by color is that I'll have to come down here and select all areas, not just a single area. Okay, so basically I would trace this, and then I would come back with my black, select trace by color again, and choose black, and it would trace all the black areas for me, all areas. Okay, so that is how I can turn a PNG or a JPEG into a cut file. Okay, now I do usually say, you'll run into this a lot of files that you're purchasing are based off of fonts, and that's fine. I always try to encourage people to branch out and try to make their own. But I will say this, that a lot of times if you are using clipart off of Google, or any website or anything like that, any clipart that you can bring in and you want to trace, a lot of times you will not get a very clean trace on text, just because there just seems to be some little details or nuances that are not going to pick up very good. This one was the exception. And you'll notice I've got my two different parts here. And then I could just simply fill them in. Now remember, filling them in does not change with the color that they cut, which I know kind of seems probably common sense. But just in case it's not, remember that cutting different colors will require you to split these up and cut the different color vinyl on the different color cutting mats. Now this is another big difference that you'll notice, especially if you joined in to watch us on Monday. The Cricut Design Space will split up your colors for you. Silhouette Studio does not do that right off the bat, and that's okay. I do it the old-fashioned way. I move my blue off. I'm going to move my black up. I will cut this here, and then I will move my black off, and I will move my blue on, and I will cut this. Okay, and that is perfectly fine if that's the way that you want to do it. But I do want to show you one thing that you can do. Again, Designer Edition and higher. I hate to keep harping on that. I'm not saying that you have to go out and purchase Designer Edition, but I'm just letting you know if you're following along or if you're going to come back and watch this later or if you're taking notes, certain features that I'm using are Designer Edition and higher. But if you have Designer Edition, you can come over to see where it says Action By up here at the top. You can click over to Fill, and it gives you the options, what you want to cut and what you don't. If I click on blue, you notice my blue lights up in a bold blue outline. And if I click on black, my black will light up in a bold black outline. Now, the reason I'm pointing that out is because I could easily come here, select blue, cut the blue. All right, unload my mat, load my black, deselect the blue, and now select black, and then cut my black, okay? So I just wanted to point that out, not to confuse you. I usually don't remember to use the cut by color. I do it the old-fashioned way, and I move it out of the way and only cut what I need, okay? But just know that there are options available for you out there. So let's talk about setting up with sizing, okay? Now, I am a big fan of measuring your blank every single time. Even if it's, a tote bag, and I've used these tote bags all the time. Give it a cursory glance, break out your measuring tape. If you're a box subscriber, I sent out those pink measuring tapes with the box. The last time we had what we considered a business box. So just measure it out. So for example, if I'm going to do a tote bag, okay, the tote bags that I was using the other day in the video from, when was that? It was last Thursday, okay, and I was doing a tote bag, so I'm going to measure out, my tote bag was 14 by 14 inches. So I come over here on my left-hand side, and I go to my drawing tools. I have a rectangle. Okay, now if I hold down the Shift key, while I'm drawing, it will keep me in a perfect box, regardless of where my pointer is, okay? So I can keep increasing this until it is 14 by 14. Okay, if I find it difficult or inconvenient to do it that way, and I'm gonna zoom out so you can see, I can also use, on my transform panel, I can also use my scale menu. Okay, when I click on scale, I can lock or unlock. This is my aspect ratio. I want to keep my aspects the same, so I'm going to lock it, and I can just type in 14 and hit apply, and now my square is exactly 14 by 14. Okay, so now when I go to size for my tote bag, if for some reason I wanted to, I don't want to, but I could go all the way to the edge. Now remember, your tote bag, you're going to lose some of your space on the sides and the bottom because when you fill it up, it will expand. So you don't really want to go complete side to side, but I can simply do, say, 11 inches. Again, I'm going to lock that aspect ratio, and I can just type in 11 inches. And that gives me 1.5 inches on each side. But this is my way to be able to see, am I going to be happy with the size of that? If I had just measured out my tote bag to be 14 by 14 inches, then perhaps I might have said, oh, okay, well, I can go up to 13.5 inches. And as soon as I cut it out of my HTV and tried to put on my tote bag, I would have realized that that's probably going to be too large. Probably 11 inches will be too large for what it is you're dealing with. So that part's completely up to you, but using this and drawing out your square gives you a guide for how large you want to make things. The same can be said for using certain templates. This is more important if you're using Cricut, but when I'm using the SVG file, I can't count on an SVG file importing to the exact size that I need it. Now, one just comes to the top of my head, obviously, is Craft Chameleon, right? Because they're wonderful and they send out templates for their acrylic blanks. That way you can set up your files. They do include the studio format for those, so you can absolutely count on those being the right size. But just in case, it doesn't hurt to measure it out if you're working with a different distributor for whatever reason. So having this on here to be able to do this, if I was doing a round keychain, I could simply come here and I could use the ellipse and draw that out. Again, don't forget, if you hold down your shift key, you'll get a perfect circle, so just throwing that out there. Now when it's time to cut, I don't actually need that box, so I can delete it and move it out of the way, and I know that my file is sized correctly. So I know I kind of threw out a lot of information at one time. I'm going to give you guys a chance to catch up. I'm also going to jump over to the Craft Chameleon page. So if you guys are watching me there, hold on just 1 second with your questions, and I will see if I can get them answered. Here we go. Okay, any questions? Mine has been fine. Well, I'm sorry, Peggy, I did not see you and what you were talking about, so, but I'm glad it has been fine. Okay, so back to Silhouette Life Inspiration Box. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. Okay, so we talked about setting up with sizing. We talked about importing SVGs and DXF and PNG or JPEGs. Okay, now let's talk about, because in Cricut Design Space we talked about using group versus attach, but we don't have to worry about group versus attach in here, but especially when we're tracing, we might have to worry about using group or ungroup versus make a compound path, right? If I ungroup this, remember I traced this and I had my two separate pieces, okay? But you'll notice if I go to ungroup this nurse, it's not an option. See, my ungroup is grayed out, okay? Because when you trace, it traces it in as a compound path, and that's a little bit different from grouping. So when you are working with a compound path, what I want you to see, I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to change the fill color because it gets a little confusing, and I'm just going to turn on the red line. This is what you would have seen when I originally traced it, okay? So I cannot ungroup it, and say for whatever reason, there are parts of this that I do not want to cut. That's okay, because instead of ungrouping, I can release the compound path. Now what I did was I clicked directly on the red line, I right-clicked to access my shortcut menu. Release the compound path, and you'll notice this broke this design apart into all these different pieces. This can be good and this can be bad. The reason this can be good is now I can do whatever I want to do with all these different pieces. So for example, say I only wanted the stethoscope and I didn't actually want to use nurse. I can come in here and I can delete all these pieces, and there's my stethoscope, correct? But say I'm trying to do something and I accidentally move the middle of my S. Well, now it's going to look funny when I go to cut it. So it can be good and it can be bad. You just have to pay attention to what it is you're watching or what it is you're moving. Don't forget that undo button is there. Okay, so I've released my compound path. Now let me show you what happens. Basically, I have told Silhouette Studio that all of these different shapes are individuals. Okay, it's like, do I want to be individual or do I want to be part of a bigger whole? That's the difference between group and make a compound path. I've released the compound path, and even if I group these together, watch what happens when I fill it in. See, it fills in the middle of my S, fills in my E, the middle of my stethoscope is filled in. Now let's just say if I were to cut this, it would still cut correctly. Because Silhouette Studio is still going to pick up that these are cut lines. But not only does it throw it off aesthetically, it can throw off the way that my shapes interact with each other. Okay, so I've grouped them together so they move around together, but if I want these to look and work correctly, I can right click and I'm going to make a compound path. Now we're back where we started. So by making the compound path, I told Silhouette Studio that these are not individual shapes. These are all shapes that are working together. These are shapes that are forming a whole. Okay, now this is one whole image. And again, I can't ungroup it. So if I needed to make any changes at this point, I would go back and release the compound path. Let's see, then I'm starting back from square one. Okay, so just some things to keep in mind. And I know, again, that was kind of a lot of information. That was an information dump. So sorry about that if I kind of overloaded you. If you are truly beginning with Silhouette Studio, the only reason that you need to know about making or releasing a compound path at this point as a beginner is because when you're tracing, you will start to experiment with tracing, and that's perfectly fine, but sometimes you will trace something that has pieces that you don't need. And it'll be frustrating that you can't ungroup them. So you'll have to remember that you'll need to release that compound path in order to delete the unnecessary parts. Okay. So we have covered importing SVGs, DXF, images. Okay. We briefly touched on tracing. And we talked about unzipping your files before you can open them. We talked about setting up our design to be the proper size and releasing compound path versus grouping and ungrouping. Okay, so definitely covered a lot of information there. If you need to, go back and watch this on the rewind, go back and do a replay, still ask your questions if there's anything I've gone over that has been confusing. Because I want you to, by the end of this darn quarantine thing we're going through, you guys are going to be professionals and you're going to be knocking it out of the ballpark here with setting up your designs. Okay? Again, if you have any recommendations or suggestions for what you want to see next week, feel free to comment that as well, or post it to the main page, and we will definitely try to get it worked in, because that's what we're here for, is setting things up for you to set you up for success. Okay? All right, I'm going to give you a few more minutes. I'm going to check back in with my Craft Chameleon folks. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them now. If I went over anything too fast and you want to see it again, go ahead and feel free to throw that out there. Nobody's going to judge you, I promise. All right. Can't live without Control G. Yes, Control Z is the ultimate shortcut. If you take nothing else away from this video, Control Z, if you're on a PC, Control Z is your undo button. Now I know you kind of have this little arrow up here. Okay, but Control Z seriously is an amazing shortcut to learn. So, alrighty, well, I'm not seeing any questions. I hope that means that you guys really learned a lot and you made some really good notes, or you're going to come back and watch it on the replay. But if you need me, comment. I'll come back and answer you. And let's do it again this time next week. Remember, next Wednesday, 7 o'clock, I'm here for my Silhouette Studio people. If you're catching this and you're a Cricut user, that's okay. We forgive you. You can join us on Monday because then we'll be showing you really cool things that you can do in Cricut Design Space. So also, don't forget tomorrow is our Craft Along TV series going from, when does that go? From 6 to 8? I start at 6, Jamie at 6:30, Lisa Potts at 7, and Andrea Ross at 7:30. And all of those times are in Central, so if you're in Eastern, you kind of got to give yourself an extra hour. But definitely turn on notifications. Facebook will remind you, hey, somebody's live, come check it out. And those are going to be 4 really awesome projects that hopefully you can follow along. I personally will be talking about some of the projects that we just sent out in our subscription box. Just finally got delivered starting today and yesterday, so really excited about those. But for tonight, I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it, and we will see you again next week. Thank you.